Your badge doesn't scan anymore, said the security guard with a half-eaten donut in one hand and a pitying look in his eyes. I stood there in the lobby, holding a coffee that still had steam coming off it, staring at the red denial light blinking like a damn heartbeat. My name, Rachel Thomas, flashed once on the terminal and vanished. No warning, no heads up, just erased. A ghost in the building I helped build. 2 floors up, Bryce, the CEO's son and walking LinkedIn profile pic, was still shaking hands after the successful product launch he hijacked. Same platform I spent 12 years keeping alive through outages, turnover, and budget slashings that felt like open-heart surgery without anesthesia. Time for new leadership, he had said to the entire department with a smirk and a Starbucks cup he didn't pay for. Fresh blood for the new era. And then, Rachel, thank you for your service. You're done here, just like that. After the streamers dropped from the ceiling and the interns clapped like trained seals. No handshake, no thank you speech. Just a thin man in designer sneakers trying to look brave in his dad's shadow, firing the only person who still knew how the old system actually worked. They framed it like a symbolic transition. Said my departure would send a clear signal to the market. Sure, like firing your mechanic after your car starts for the first time in years. HR, all flustered, shoved a separation letter into my hands. No box to pack, no cake in the break room. Just a document missing one tiny thing, my signature. I noticed, they didn't. I folded it neatly and slid it into my purse like a napkin from a murder scene. And hey, if you've made it this far, do me one favor, hit subscribe, maybe even like the story. Keeps the stories rolling and the algorithms from thinking I've disappeared like my job did. Trust me, we've got a lot more to unpack. Back at my desk, no one said a word. Even Jasper, my junior dev who used to bring me Diet Dr. Pepper every Friday, suddenly couldn't make eye contact. He stared hard at his keyboard like it held the secrets of the universe. I pulled out my succulent plant, unplugged the charger I brought from home, and tucked the small ceramic coffee mug my daughter made in 4th grade into my tote. The one with the uneven sides and the word MOM carved in a wobble. 12 years, gone in 12 minutes. I passed Bryce on my way out. He didn't say a thing, just nodded like he was sealing a business deal and not gutting the only brain left in the building that still knew what the word recertification meant. And I didn't fight, didn't scream, didn't cry. I walked out calm. But I didn't go home, not right away. Instead, I drove to the library, sat at one of those cold metal desks with a sticky keyboard, and logged into my old terminal through the back door I wrote myself 6 years ago. Funny how legacy access isn't a concern when you're the one who built the legacy. They'd forgotten that the federal grant software, the one that funded their shiny product, I wrote the compliance module. I pulled up the certification logs, scanned the approval forms. Clause 6.7d, all recertifications must be signed by the original primary signatory unless deceased or incapacitated. I wasn't dead. I clicked view history. My name, Rachel Thomas, was still there, tagged on every submission since the project's inception, quarter after quarter, certification after certification. And the new launch? The one Bryce just danced through like he was on a Gotham IPO stage, still pending federal recertification, still waiting on one required field. Mine, they thought I was a relic, a leftover, some back-office dinosaur dragging down the new wave, but I was the lock, and they just threw away the only key. So I leaned back in that broken library chair, cracked my knuckles, and smiled for the first time all day. Let's see how far Bryce gets when the oxygen starts running out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream, throw plates, or post cryptic memes about betrayal on Facebook like Karen from finance did when her dog died. I just walked into my apartment, shut the door, took off my badge like it was a tumor, and set it on the table next to the unopened mail and a half-dead poinsettia from last Christmas. Sat on the couch like someone who'd just survived a slow-motion car crash. No airbags, just glass in the teeth. The silence was worse than any insult. The clock ticked like it had a grudge. The fridge made that weird buzzing sound again. And the light from my old dual-monitor setup blinked in the corner of the room, like it remembered what we used to be. 12 years of late nights, log files, and duct tape code, and now all that was left of me was a beige Cisco laptop humming under a pile of post-its and rejection letters from other jobs I never had time to apply to. I didn't pour wine. I didn't call my sister. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just sat down, cracked my neck, and typed in the override key I hadn't used in 5 years. The terminal wheezed like an old dog getting up for one last run. And there it was, the federal R&D grant file, 42 PDFs, 9 XML schema docs, a backend login portal still tied to the Department of Innovation's testbed. I opened the main compliance tracker, credentials valid, no flags, Bryce never revoked them. Clause 6.7d wasn't even hidden, it was right there on the front page of the certification schema, bolded like a neon middle finger. All quarterly and milestone recertifications must be signed by the designated primary signatory on record unless legally deceased or medically incapacitated. Delegation not permitted. I read it twice. Then again, and then I laughed. Not a full laugh, more like a rusty chuckle through clenched teeth, because they really thought I was gone. that they could wipe me from the system like a bad patch file and keep the funding humming. As if I hadn't sat in that soul-sucking government meeting 3 years ago and personally insisted that clause get added. I had fought for it, because no one else wanted to be on the hook if something went wrong. And now that hook was wrapped around their entire company's throat. I bookmarked the portal, exported the grant logs to a USB the shape of a Hello Kitty I got from a conference in 2014. Then I shut the terminal and stared out the window for a solid hour while the streetlights blinked on and the world kept turning like nothing had happened. But something had happened. And somewhere downtown, Bryce was probably popping champagne and high-fiving the dev team for pushing the launch button on a system he couldn't spell. I opened a blank notepad and started writing down every place my credentials still touched. Audit logs, deployment certs, compliance portals, and of course, the core API key for the grant's secure data pipeline. They'd hard-coded my ID into half the back end. It was easier at the time. Cleaner. Now it was a noose. They'd cut me loose without reading the fine print, without asking who the grant agency would call when something failed, without realizing that if even one quarterly cert lapsed, the funds froze, and they just pushed a broken, uncertified platform live. I wasn't going to sabotage anything. I wasn't going to hack their servers or leak passwords. I wasn't even going to send an anonymous tip. I didn't have to. I just had to not sign. Let them run out of air on their own. Bryce's idea of innovation was a dashboard with his initials in the footer and a dark mode toggle. He called it Helix, like it was some kind of miracle drug, instead of a half-baked Frankenstein of a project stitched together by a no-bid contractor he met at a rooftop crypto mixer. First day post-launch, he wheeled a cart of Red Bulls into the bullpen like a substitute teacher bribing middle schoolers. "Welcome to the new era," he said, chest puffed, as if we'd all just stepped into a TEDx talk about synergy. Then came the Slack announcement, 2 more layoffs. A QA lead with 8 years under her belt, and one of the last DevOps guys who could spell infrastructure. No severance packages. Just we're pivoting lean. In Bryce speak, lean meant deleting the safety net and blaming the fall on gravity. He canceled all compliance training sessions, said they were legacy rituals that discouraged risk-taking, and he went on a podcast and told the host the company was entering a hypergrowth phase driven by agility and founder-led execution. Meanwhile, in the actual building, contractors weren't getting paid, VPN tunnels were crashing mid-deploy, and the product's internal cert system, the one tied directly to the federal funding timeline, was throwing silent sync errors. But no one could tell Bryce, because Bryce didn't listen. He called bugs features of transformation. Every time someone brought up an error in Jira, he replied with iterate on that. The man once tried to open a CSV file in Photoshop, and now he was running the company. From where I sat, watching the chaos through a dozen invisible endpoints, it was almost artistic. I had alerts set on every backend audit ping. The logs lit up like a Christmas tree. Failed auths, unsynced token refreshes, ghost users triggering outdated job queues that hadn't been touched since 2020. I didn't lift a finger. It was all them. In the dev Slack, my name started popping up like a haunting. Did Rachel ever document this key rotation thing? Anyone know if Rachel set up a backup for the GRT cron cert? Did Rachel leave the vault passphrase anywhere? I'm locked out. I could almost hear them whispering over lukewarm burritos in the break room, wondering why nothing was working, why the Jenkins deploy froze, why the staging build suddenly needed a cert that hadn't been reissued since last quarter. And the answer was always the same, because no one had replaced me. They just deleted me. And now the house I built was folding in on itself. The first real break came when a freelance security consultant posted in the internal hash payments channel, "Hey, one of the contractor payroll tokens just got rejected by the backend. Looks like a missing cert on the transaction handler?" Bryce responded with a sunglasses emoji. A sunglasses emoji. That Friday, 3 engineers didn't get paid. Finance blamed HR. HR blamed IT. IT said the system was still settling in. And Bryce posted another Slack. Change is uncomfortable, but so is growth. Contractors started bailing. A front-end guy with a newborn ghosted mid-sprint. A project manager took a mental health sabbatical and never returned. And all the while, Bryce was still standing in front of digital whiteboards on Zoom, sketching vision pyramids and saying, "Rachel was a great builder, but now we're scaling." No, Bryce, you weren't scaling. You were sinking with a smile. The first report came in just after lunch on a Wednesday. "Hey, is anyone else getting locked out?" It was Derek. Intern they never officially onboarded, poking his head into the dev pit with the confidence of a man who thought Docker was a food delivery app. At first, no one responded. People thought it was user error. Then Marta, senior backend, 3 monitors and a standing desk, froze mid-keystroke. "Shit," she muttered, "mine's down too." By 2:14 p.m., 4 machines were dark. By 3 o'clock, Jenkins refused all deploys. Staging froze. Prod reverted to a rollback build from 2 months ago. The Slack thread in Hash for help lit up with question marks and slow panic. Anyone else losing access? Token refresh failing? 404 from internal auth? Then someone dropped a screenshot. A plain black terminal window with a single red line. GRTC.5 cert invalid connection terminated. That's when the fear set in. Bryce didn't notice at first. He was still in a conference room giving a talk to the new marketing interns about the blockchain of mindset. But IT noticed, and they were not calm. I was watching all of it unfold from the comfort of my apartment, feet up, tea in hand, admin panel, glowing quietly on my second monitor. My custom dashboard, the one I built years ago when no one else wanted to learn the government's clunky old compliance systems, hummed without error. All green lights on my side, and more importantly, full access. They hadn't shut me out because they didn't know how. The new system had no hooks into the old cert layer. Bryce thought it was all deprecated, like I was. He never realized that I built the original system to require a quarterly revalidation of device credentials, tied directly to the GRTC.5 certificate issued through the Department of Innovation. And that cert expired 5 days after they launched without me, so I started pulling levers. Nothing dramatic, no nukes, just cleanup. Outdated token chains, deleted. Stale device credentials, gone. Unverified logins from the QA subnet, revoked. It wasn't sabotage, it was hygiene. They launched a product without renewing the very backbone it stood on. I just let the rot catch up. Bryce, of course, responded with the grace of a drunk peacock in a glass factory, stormed into its bullpen, demanding to know why his platform was broken. When no one gave him the answer he wanted, he fired the infrastructure lead, Ron, a man who hadn't taken a sick day in 6 years and once fixed a broken cluster during his mother's funeral. Then Bryce did what all bad leaders do when they're spiraling. He held a town hall. A full company Zoom call. Camera mandatory. No questions allowed. He opened with, "We're going through growing pains. Realignment is hard. Loyalty is critical right now." Then he started assigning blame. Passive-aggressively, of course. "We need team members who want to be here, who understand urgency." That was rich coming from a man whose idea of urgency was using his dad's name to book Coachella VIP passes. I watched it all from my end like a rerun I already knew the ending to. Their new system had no bridge. Their certs had no renewal path. Their access logs were full of ghosted pings to an invalid endpoint. And the one person who could have saved them, they let walk out the door without so much as a handshake. And now they were stuck in limbo, locked out of the system they launched too soon, backed by money they could no longer justify, tethered to a federal grant that required a ghost to recertify their existence. I refreshed my portal. 15 more terminal locks. System status, degrading. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat, I just kept cleaning house. The email hit at 10:17 a.m. on a Thursday. Subject line, notice, GRTC.5 grant recertification audit, site visit required. It came from a no-nonsense Gov address addressed to the company's legal, compliance, and finance leads, with all the digital warmth of a root canal notice. The body was polite, bureaucratic, and impossible to ignore. In accordance with Clause 6.7d of your grant agreement, the Department of Innovation will conduct an on-site recertification audit. Per statute, the original primary signatory must be present for certification validation. Please confirm availability no later than COB Friday. It might as well have been written in blood. Within 50 minutes, the CFO was pacing the hallway like a man trying to remember if he left the stove on. In 2019, I knew him. Darren, sharp suit, decent instincts, and the only exec who ever thanked me when I bailed out the quarterly expense system mid-crash 3 years ago. He wasn't stupid. He understood paperwork. He understood liability. He was also the first to say it aloud. "We don't have access to the primary signatory." Bryce, lounging in his glass office like a Bond villain on Ambien, didn't even look up from his phone. "So, just sign it, one of you?" Darren froze. "We can't." Rachel was the designated signatory on the grant. "It's baked into the approval chain. You can't override that." Bryce waved a hand like he was dismissing a mosquito. "Okay, so we make a new form, resubmit, whatever." A junior legal associate, who looked like she still used Snapchat to flirt, mumbled from the corner. Clause 6.7d states that substitutions are only allowed if the signatory is deceased or legally incapacitated. Bryce rolled his eyes. "Well, she's gone, isn't she?" "Gone isn't the same as dead," Darren said, rubbing his forehead. "She's still listed as active in the government cert portal." That's when the CEO walked in. Mr. Monarch himself, the man who once told me in a review that I had too much brain for a back-end role but never once said that in front of a board member. He strolled in with his tie crooked and his golf tan peeling. "Let's not overthink this," he said. "We'll fix it. We always do." Bryce smirked and nodded like it was divine prophecy. But Darren didn't relax, not this time. He picked up the phone and called legal, then compliance. Then HR. I watched it all. Tapped into a leftover calendar API I still had admin-level access to. Within an hour, 8 emergency meetings popped up, all titled some variation of R. Thomas Access. They were panicking. Meanwhile, I was refilling my tea. Because 3 hours earlier, I'd gotten a very different email. This one from my new employer. Hi, Rachel. The audit team has been assigned a site visit for your previous employer under the GRTC point 5 grant you originally certified. Given your new role, we'd like you to be present during the recertification. You will not be required to engage beyond confirming the signature record, but your presence will be noted as official. There was a smiley face at the end. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was nervous, not even because I was surprised, but because the moment I knew would come, the moment I engineered into every line of that damn system when I wrote it, was here. I was no longer a ghost, I was the firewall, and they were going to have to look me in the eye. The board meeting was supposed to be routine, last check-in before the audit. A formality, a photo op, maybe some empty praise to Bryce for steering the ship. But by the time they hit slide 3 of the deck, the room had the energy of a sinking cruise ship ballroom. The problem started with a simple question from the CFO. Can someone walk us through the audit trail from last quarter's submission? Silence. Finance had been trying to access the GRTC point 5 logs since Monday. Every request came back blank, or worse, archived data with mismatched checksums. The compliance team swore they had backups. IT swore they handed over the right keys. Legal just stared at their tablets like the answers might materialize if they blinked hard enough. The CTO, visibly sweating through his collar, finally spoke. Who was maintaining the compliance log infrastructure? More silence. The kind that settles like wet ash. Bryce cleared his throat and said, Rachel set it up, but I assumed it was handed off. To who? Asked the board chair, eyebrows raised. Bryce's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a goldfish choking on a paperclip. The CTO flipped open his laptop, typing furiously. I'm checking the system registry now. There's got to be a credential rotation, he stopped mid-sentence. Her name's still on it, he muttered. Everyone turned. She's still listed as the active signatory in the grant portal, he added, blinking. The board chair leaned forward. Meaning what exactly? Bryce looked like he was trying to fake a yawn. It just hasn't been updated. Fix it before the audit. The CFO cut in. You can't fix a federal database with a damn browser refresh, Bryce. It's immutable once approved. Darren pulled out a printout from the portal and slid it across the table. There it was in plain black ink, primary signatory, Rachel Thomas, status, active. Someone whispered shit and no one even flinched. The CTO kept typing. I'm trying to reverse engineer her log structure, but it's custom. It's not documented. Looks like she built a compliance overlay that merged with our internal tooling. So you can't access it? A board member asked. Not without her credentials, the CTO admitted. Bryce slammed his pen down. Why didn't anyone flag this sooner? Darren didn't even look at him. We did. You told us to iterate on it. The CEO, arms crossed, tried to diffuse. Let's not assign blame. We just need solutions. Let's call her in. Have her sign, smooth it over. Sir Darren said slowly, she doesn't work for us anymore. She works for them. Nobody spoke after that. Meanwhile, I was at home, steaming a dress shirt I hadn't worn since the last all hands. My badge from the Department of Innovation lay on the table next to it, clipped to a fresh lanyard. My suitcase was packed. Laptop clean, notes printed. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was ready. I'd spent the last 3 nights checking and rechecking the original portal submission sequence, making sure nothing could be retrofitted, no signatures forged, no clever last-minute tech fix that could thread the needle without me. There wasn't. That's the thing about compliance. Either it's clean or it's dead. I checked the dashboard one last time. My name glowed at the top of the cert tree like a scar they couldn't laser off. The final sync from their system had failed. Their credentials were locked. The timer was ticking. And tomorrow I walked through their front door again, not as an employee, but as the only person who could save them from what they built. The boardroom had been scrubbed clean. Literally, someone must have gone on a last-minute Clorox rampage because the whole place reeked of lemon-scented desperation. The projector flickered with a looped welcome slide, GRTC point 5 Federal Site Visit Transparency. Trust. Innovation, as if buzzwords could fog the smell of panic. Bryce sat near the head of the table, trying to look bored. One foot propped up on the crossbar of his chair, thumb lazily scrolling through emails on his phone like this was just another investor check-in. The CEO sat to his right, hands folded over a notepad he wouldn't open. CFO on the left, jaw tight, tapping a capped pen like a detonator. The rest of the board was scattered around the table, too many ties, many fake smiles, not enough understanding of what was about to happen. At 9:03 a.m., the door opened. He didn't walk in, he arrived. Gray suit, clipboard in hand, no laptop, no tech flair, just old-school government steel. Good morning, he said, nodding once. I'm Grant Emerson, Office of Federal Tech and Innovation. I'll be conducting your GRTC point 5 quarterly compliance audit. The CEO stood to shake his hand, smiled wide. We're excited to have you. Shouldn't take long. Emerson didn't smile back. He opened his folder with a precision that made the room go quiet. This project is currently funded under a $3.1 million federal match grant, he began, eyes never leaving the paper. As part of your ongoing obligations, your platform's most recent deployment must be recertified for compliance. Per statute, This must be completed by the primary signatory on file. He looked up. Can you please confirm the availability of Rachel Thomas? Bryce blinked. She doesn't work here anymore. The room stilled. Emerson raised an eyebrow. I see. When was she officially removed from the project? The CFO coughed. We didn't remove her per se. She departed prior to the current milestone. Emerson nodded. Was a substitution filed? No, Darren replied quietly. Is she deceased or legally incapacitated? Everyone looked at each other. The aircon kicked on with a whimper. Bryce crossed his arms. Look, we've got the CTO here. We've got everyone involved in the build. If you need a walkthrough, we can give you one. Emerson closed the folder with a firm snap. I don't need a walkthrough, he said. I need the original signatory. Clause 6.7d requires it. If Rachel Thomas cannot recertify, this audit cannot proceed. Without recertification, Match Grant enters a suspended state pending resolution. The CEO forced a chuckle. Surely there's some kind of exception or override. I mean, we've launched. The product's live. It's already integrated with multiple departments. That may be, Emerson said evenly, but it doesn't change the legal structure of the funding. Bryce leaned forward, trying to sound confident. So what, you freeze the funds until we drag her back in? Emerson didn't blink, if she's willing. If not, the grant expires retroactively. That would include the most recent drawdown you used to finance the Q2 sprint, correct? Darren paled. Bryce scoffed. This is ridiculous. Emerson reached into his bag and pulled out a single sheet. Set it on the table. This is your most recent submission packet. It's unsigned. It's been flagged as incomplete in our system. Attempted submission came from an invalid credential string, yours, I believe, he said, glancing at Bryce. You are not listed as an authorized party. The board started shifting. Suits rustled. The CEO looked at Darren, who now had both hands on his pen. What happens if we don't get her? One board member asked. Emerson didn't answer immediately. He glanced at his watch, then the door. I believe that question will be answered momentarily, he said, and then the door opened again. The door eased open like it knew it was about to ruin someone's life. My shoes made the softest click on the polished floor, but you'd think I walked in swinging a wrecking ball. Heads turned, jaws tightened. Bryce went pale first, like a cartoon character about to get hit by a falling anvil labeled consequences. The CEO just stared, unmoving, hands still folded, as if maybe stillness would render him invisible. I didn't speak, didn't smile. Just walked in calm, blazer sharp, badge clipped high, folder in hand, like I belonged to a reality they no longer understood. Grant Emerson, the auditor, gave me a nod. Miss Thomas. I returned it, sat down in the empty chair at the far end of the table, didn't even glance at Bryce. Emerson flipped the folder open again, held it up like a mirror. This is the original GRTC.5 approval form, signed and registered 5 years ago. Designates the primary signatory as Rachel Thomas. He paused, scanned the room. The field is locked, cannot be reassigned. No override path exists unless conditions of death or medical incapacitation are satisfied and documented. The CEO finally blinked. So you're saying no one can substitute? Correct, Emerson said, which is why the current submission is invalid, and why the grant funding has been placed under immediate administrative hold. All usage of those funds from the last submission window forward is now under federal review. That landed like a bomb. Bryce opened his mouth, then shut it again. He looked to his father. Dad, but the CEO had nothing left in the tank. Just a slow, shallow breath as his eyes flicked between me and the document. He was running the math, the salaries, the vendor contracts, the half-finished projects currently being paid for with money that now didn't exist. Behind him, the CTO pulled up a dashboard on his tablet. We're locked out of the deployment environment. He muttered, cert expired. All pushes suspended. Finance platforms offline too, Darren added, reading from his phone. Stripe integration says funding source is flagged. A board member leaned forward, voice low, like he was afraid the walls might hear. So what happens if she doesn't sign it? Emerson was already packing up. Then your project is in breach, and the repayment process begins. Bryce stood. This is absurd. This is sabotage. Emerson looked at him coolly. This is compliance. No one moved. No one breathed. I sat there, legs crossed, calm as ever. They wanted drama. Tears, maybe a petty monologue. They got silence, not vengeance, precision. Bryce broke first, sweat pooling in the hollow of his collar, voice cracking as he blurted out, who exactly did we fire? I turned my head slowly, finally looking at him. Then at the CEO. Then at the board. Not a word. Just a stare like stone. Carved from 12 years of being ignored, underestimated, overlooked. The silence answered everything they needed to know, and the collapse had only just begun. The silence was thicker than carpet glue. You could feel it clinging to the walls, crawling across the ceiling, seeping into every breath like mildew. No one moved. No one dared. Even Bryce had stopped his usual chair-spinning twitch, frozen with his mouth half open like he was buffering. The CEO sat perfectly still, hands limp on the table, the tremor in his knuckles just beginning to bloom. Emerson, calm as ever, looked across the table at me. Miss Thomas, he said, voice smooth and surgical, are you still willing to recertify the grant? It was a fair question, and for a split second, I let the possibility hang in the air like a low-hanging branch. Let them imagine a world where I was still reachable, still persuadable, still the kind of woman they could ask things of. And I reached into my folder, pulled out a single sheet, slid it forward with a practiced grace, and watched every eye in the room track it like a missile. A new org chart. Header, Department of Innovation Grant Oversight Division Line 3, Rachel Thomas, Senior Program Compliance Officer, External Audit Liaison. I tapped the page once with my index finger. I've been reassigned. That was it. No threats, no raised voice. Just fact, cold, clean, and final. The CEO's lips parted. His jaw moved, but no sound came. The blood drained from his face in slow motion. He looked like a man watching his own signature on a foreclosure notice. Not angry, not even sad, just stunned, like the laws of physics had betrayed him. Bryce made a choking sound. Wait, but I thought she was, you thought wrong, I said. My voice didn't need to be loud. It carried just fine. Emerson glanced at the chart, nodded once, and folded the audit folder closed. Well, he said, turning to the head of the table, I think that concludes our visit. He stood, adjusting his tie, then added almost gently, like a priest before last rites, who exactly did you fire? The CEO's voice barely rose above a whisper. Oh my God, and there it was. No explosion, no breakdown. Just collapse, the silent, airless kind that happens when someone finally realizes they've built their empire on sand. And the tide's already come in. I stood, clipped my federal badge back to my blazer, and pushed in my chair like I hadn't just detonated their financial lungs. No handshake, no goodbye. I walked past Bryce without a glance, past the CEO without a nod, past the board without acknowledgement. Out the door, down the hall, through the lobby, and into sunlight. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't leaving under someone else's orders. This time, I walked out on my terms. And the badge on my lapel? It opened more doors than any of them ever could. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.